Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California. You're listening to the Unsugarcoated podcast with your host, Aalia.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday to you. This is Aalia with Unsugarcoated with Aalia. Wherever you are, I hope that you're doing well. I hope that you are living empowered today. I am very excited to share with you the guest. I actually have two guests today, not one, but two amazing guests. It's the first time we've actually done that. And so let's get right into it, guys. Enrico Moses has been marketing products and services directly to consumers while working with powerful business leaders, world-famous artists, successful entrepreneurs, and culture-changing creatives for the past 15 years. Sean Rimokh is a mega advocate of personal growth. Having worked with transformational and nonprofit organizations, his expertise includes personnel management, organizational training, and strategic planning while overseeing businesses, processes, and communications. Today, these two men are here to talk about Zen House, created for entrepreneurs, leaders, and creatives with the objective of elevating consciousness one circle at a time. Everybody, welcome. Welcome, Sean and Enrico.
Thanks for having us, Aalia.
Thank you. Well, it's really a pleasure to see you, even though it's on screen. We were talking earlier about the different ways that we're all doing this. How are you? How are you guys feeling today?
Yeah, things are moving today. It's been a busy day. We have a Zen circle tonight at is it 5 o'clock? 5:30? Yeah, 5:30. So just preparing for that, and we've been in the midst of actually finishing up with digital Zen leadership training, which we've been doing for the last 6 weeks. So yeah, feeling the energy, feeling the vibes.
That's incredible. I can't wait to share with people what Zen House is about. But before we do that, I want to get more into your background. So Sean, let me have you share with the audience, what before you came to this particular venture, what your background. I mean, I read a little bit in the intro, but why don't you share with us from your mouth, what have you really been involved in over the past few years and brought you to this point?
Yeah, I think when I was about 7 years ago, when I was 24, I started venturing into personal development and self-mastery and just working with some close friends and just testing out the waters of like what's possible, because a lot of things in my life were not working for me. And frankly, I wasn't doing a lot of things I said I was going to do, which, created a lack of integrity and a lack of accountability in my life. So I wanted to get better and do better and be better. And through working with, the first step for me was working with like a nonprofit. It was called the Mankind Project. And that was an incredible opportunity where I gained so much insight and exposure and training of working with men all over the world who are really like the human or the man 2.0, the emotional man, the empowered man, the man that I define as a man who is willing to be authentic, is willing to step into vulnerability. So that's when I started to really focus and ask myself, well, what else is out there? And then I remember venturing into the world of the Landmark Forum. And actually, that's funny because that's where I met my wife, Tracy. So we've been pursuing that for a couple years after we met. And I've just been continuing journey and learning and doing different trainings and learning about what does mindfulness mean and how can I improve myself and the people around me. And yeah, I remember about 3 years ago, I started a e-commerce subscription business in the fashion industry because my family business actually happens to be in the fashion industry. So would work with them to start building out a new division and eventually a new startup, which was a lot of fun. And I learned a lot of things in regards to building a team, hiring, firing, creating organizational dynamics, working on how to engage employees, building out a diverse team, creating culture. And it was just a lot of fun. But I realized over time that I wanted to I wanted to level up and continue doing the introspective journey I've been on with following like my authentic self. So quickly, as I started to build that organization, raise some capital, and expand that business, which is still profitable today, I continue to ask myself what else is out there. And that's when Enrico and I started really tapping in and connecting and seeing what's going on with each other. And I've just been really inspired with how Enrico's doing his work, and that we start to really feel aligned. And that's when we created Zen House, to continuously build a better community that feels more integrated and more authentic and more vulnerable, so where we can check in and continue our growth as leaders, creators, and entrepreneurs.
That's important, I feel, and I agree, and I love it. I know that when you guys and I connected before the coronavirus lockdown, or I should say shelter at home, began, I don't like referring to it as a lockdown per se. It feels, much more oppressive, and it's really not. It's a choice, I believe. However, we're all dealing with that choice, and it's interrupted quite a few things, and a lot of us have had to pivot. And I think it's important. What I love about what you guys are doing for the community is you're really showing up for leaders, because people tend to think that leaders don't struggle too, that we don't have bad days. Like we were just, Enrico, you so graciously asked me how I was feeling. I was like, you know what? Today is a rough day. It's not that anything bad is happening. I just feel that heaviness. I can tell, it's trying to get in the way. I can tell even when I was, introducing, I'm like, but I don't allow the frustration to get to me. And that's what I love about what you guys do, where you're showing up and reminding leaders that it's okay. Because right now there's a lot. There's leadership coaches. There's motivational speakers. You have a growing segment of people who are jumping onto that. And then people look at them and say, okay, well, you've got all this figured out. But sometimes we don't, right? So tell me how that type of thought process, took you into this. And by the way, you guys actually had a physical space in LA when you began this, and you still do, right? Where you actually perform these Zen circles?
Well, we were doing some of the pop-ups all around LA. So utilizing different beautiful spaces like the Zen House, as we dwell in downtown Los Angeles. So being able to basically bring this to different parts of the city, because, LA is such a vast place. So, if you're on the west side, you might not want to make it downtown and vice versa. So bringing it to different places so that different neighborhoods could really lean in and, start approaching some of these circles with a little bit more calm and not having to sit in the hour of traffic. It's not the most Zen way to approach it.
It's not a way you show up. You're very not Zen. You're like, traffic drove me crazy. So, and I know I kind of asked a question and you answered that, but I want to actually go back, because men and vulnerability. Mm-hmm. Let's speak on that.
Yeah. And I think to wrap into the leadership question, it's like so many people who are leaders feel isolated, right? And feel in this place of like, well, who do I go to share and to be vulnerable? Especially what I found as an entrepreneur is, if there's struggles, am I really going to go talk to my partner? Maybe the struggles are about my partner. Am I going to tell my employees about the struggles when maybe that's not going to bring the most out of them? So it can feel so isolating in this place of leadership. And so I think that it's also tied into masculine vulnerability, where it's like, as a leader, we're taught that leaders are supposed to hold themselves in a certain way and never show vulnerability, which I think there's a certain light in that, in how you carry yourself. But then where do you take those emotions, and how do you lead an emotional group of people without allowing any emotions to show? And so instead of like showing up with all these extra emotions, maybe it's understanding like, why do I feel emotional, and being able to lead with those emotions with clarity.
Yeah, I mean, and that also walks us into like emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. And how we grow at different times. Different things feed our soul and we grow, but then we need continued growth, right? And emotional intelligence is part of that awareness that you can't do everything on your own. It's okay to not do everything on your own, and that there are other people that you can actually still be fed from. And I feel like as a leader, you're definitely giving a lot of your energy. And I want to talk on energy itself and your guys' perspective, because I'm curious to hear what you think. And everything that we do, empowering others, I think that part of the empowering others is educating them. And so you wrap that into these Zen circles, which I'm going to tell the audience my personal experience in a second. But let's talk about that energy that you guys
Yeah.
bring.
Yeah, so I think emotional intelligence is first understanding um, what emotions are you feeling? So at the Zen circles, we really dive into creating a safe space for us to first just express and to understand, like I feel sadness in my heart right now because of X, Y, and Z. And to be able to express that in front of a group of people, a lot of times, like, we don't do that. Sometimes we don't even express that to ourselves and allow ourselves to say, I feel angry and I feel that in my stomach. I feel that in my shoulders. So the first function of an emotional intelligence is really understanding what emotions am I feeling, and then being able to express that and listening to other people articulate how they feel, why they feel that way. It also naturally just starts elevating our emotional intelligence, because as I listen to other people, starting to learn, I actually feel that way too. I feel now they're talking about being angry of the lack of leadership in COVID. It's like, you know what? I didn't even realize I was angry about that. And now I'm tapping into a piece of my emotions that I was suppressing and I didn't really even understand. So I think that there's this part of understanding our own emotions, but then in the circle format, it's so important for us to be able to observe what other people are feeling, which also makes us feel so much more human. I think that when we're having our emotional experience, it can feel so overwhelming, like I'm having this experience. But then to realize, like, wow, like Aalia is having a similar experience as I'm having, like, now I don't feel as overwhelmed. I'm starting to feel a lot more seen, and I'm starting to realize that this is more of a common thing than it feels like just to me.
And
Yeah.
in addition to that, by recognizing and understanding, and also, as Enrico mentioned, to express our emotions, I think the last step would be to regulate our emotions, to be checking in with ourselves and with each other so we can empathize and feel that sense of flow you were talking about, that sense of connection, where it's like the sadness is now in the room. So, what are we going to do about it? And to regulate that and to check in with ourselves and in our bodies so we can feel that mind body connection and just flow with that, opposed to really suppressing or denying what it is we're feeling. So letting go of the judgments and creating a safe space to be able to kind of allow that experience and that empathy to take place.
Yeah, because I will say within, from time to time, when you talk to men about being vulnerable and expressing themselves, and your circles are both for men and women, but I love that you guys are very passionate about directly working with men in the community as well. And it's, you definitely get this sense of like, oh, I don't need any of that. I'm good. I'm not going to be emotional. What am I don't need to tell someone my problems like it's therapy. You have that macho. How do you guys break through the macho mentality to say to somebody, look, you know what, this could actually benefit you? I mean, what do you guys see in challenges there, and how do you work with those?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, it's something, at least for me, I could never force upon somebody else. It's not like I can ask somebody to change for me. It's the kind of idea where if I change and I develop into a leadership position or start expressing more growth or entrepreneurship or creativity, then there's this flow of like, well, what's going on there? So I think that's one way of improving in the communication, to be able to just continue going down my path, and then if people resonate with that, great. And that can be my journaling, the way I market the circles and the experience, the way I communicate and message about it. And ultimately, it's like, where are you in your life? Do you feel like there's opportunity for growth? Do you feel like there's opportunity to develop personally? Do you feel that you're interested in connecting and regulating your emotions? So I think at some point we have to meet in the middle in order to create an understanding of wanting to push ourselves and take a risk into vibing and flowing in these circles and in this work.
Yeah, and I have to say, and Enrico, I'm going to let you. I know you want to say something, but I got to say, I love that you use that term, regulating your emotions, because right now you have people with varying ideas. I mean, unfortunately, COVID has somehow turned into this very us versus them. It's very nasty. People are it's either being politicized or people have these beliefs, and instead of regulating our emotions on how we're dealing with that, you just see some very ugly behavior coming out, and or you have somebody who's acting a certain way because they feel that they're protecting themselves, which I understand, or they're frustrated, but yet they're not regulating their emotions. And I feel like with what you guys are doing, it's really great because you give people that opportunity. So I mean, I just wanted to comment. I love that you say that because I feel like we really need to be regulating ourselves right now. To the woman in Target who keeps yelling at people who are just trying to do their job, I mean, please, let's work on that.
Yeah, and I think going to the question as well, it's like, why are men avoiding these topics, right? Or avoiding their emotions? And I think so much of it has to do with the narrative that's out there. And so what we do is we're a part of this shifting narrative. I can't say like we are the shifting narrative. There's this huge shifting narrative about therapy and about sharing emotions and emotional intelligence and vulnerability. And I think that being a part of this new narrative is how people are starting to create trust and to come in and to realize like, wow, like I actually was talking to someone today who's been a part of the training, and he was telling me how he's so grateful of what this is because it was approachable for him, and he's been avoiding therapy for so long. And although this isn't replacing therapy, he felt like this is giving him so much that now he's even re-looking at what could therapy offer for him. And so I
Wow.
think that the main thing is looking at like how much dogma there is in something like therapy, and why men feel unsafe to share their emotions. So like asking those questions of like, what needs are not being met in order for men to share their emotions, and then starting to solve some of those needs where men feel more comfortable being vulnerable, because we all know if we're not comfortable, how are we supposed to be vulnerable?
Right.
And so it's like, instead of just saying, well, like force yourself to be comfortable in this uncomfortable situation, it's like, how can we create something that's naturally more comfortable so that people can start easing into being more emotionally vulnerable?
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want the audience to know my personal experience, because we're not just talking about it. I've actually participated in a Zen circle. And I like that you said that, because I guess for me as a person to explain it, if somebody was saying, well, Aalia, explain to me what it was like to go to a Zen circle. It wasn't therapy. I'm aware of that because I wasn't having anyone tell me, what my emotions meant or anything like that. However, just having that safe space. So I was able to do it through Zoom, because we'll talk about, you guys have actually now been offering them through Zoom. And I was having a really, really tough time as I have like the wave. I have a kid at home. I have kids rather, and I have a business and a foundation and then the podcast. And so I have some good days, and then I have days where I'm like, it's just a lot. And then on top of it, the fear that I have, I've only recently, we just relaunched the podcast. I haven't had the opportunity to share with my audience really, truly, in detail, my emotions as a person who does not know what my journey with coronavirus could be like. It could be fine. I could be completely. But at the same token, given the fact that I do have all those, I do have a lot of the underlying health conditions, I don't know. And that brings a sense of anxiety, not just for me, but for my family as well. So here I was, you guys were like, join us. And I did. And it was, a Zoom room of other individuals that I didn't know, which was kind of cool, because then I didn't feel like I was on the hook. I didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to feel any type of way. And you went through and asked us all a set of questions. And your first question to me, of course, was, how am I doing? And I remember just crying, but because I felt I could in that moment. Because normally when people are like, hey, Aalia, how are you? I'm like, well, I'm doing good. I'm working. And you really can't just be that authentic, let it out. And so I completely appreciated that I went to support and and also to see what it was like. And I came away, by the time that first question to the time that the last question came around, I felt so differently. I felt empowered. I felt strength. I felt peace, and I was just completely in love with the concept of what you guys are doing in general, because I mean, when I was a kid, I remember being part of like a youth group, and where we kind of got together with school, and the other youth and us talked about what we were going through, and it offered a benefit. And what you guys are doing, it offers such a huge benefit. So let's talk about what you guys were doing, and what coronavirus has now caused you to do to pivot, and looking at the good and the bad of that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you real quickly, what do you think in the Zen house, the Zen circle, like, why do you think that shift happened to you? Because I know you talked about the shift, but I'm curious of like, what do you think that was for you? Because you started, and then in the end, those questions, there's a natural shift, and I wonder what you think that was for you.
Part of it was because I was being open to it, and I allowed myself to just be honest. Being honest, I think, really helps us move forward. And secondly, of course, the other individuals who were all incredible people. I totally related to them. And even by the end of it, what was also amazing is I felt bonded in some small way to each and every single person that was in there. We didn't know each other. We might not even remember if we walked past each other on the street, but in that moment, and for that hour and a half, we were connected. We were, and that offered something to me that you don't find in your everyday conversations, where most of the time you're trying to help other people hold it together. And it's not that I was necessarily falling apart. It's just, and I think especially as a mother, I remember when I was a kid, my mom used to say to me, I would be like kind of tough and say nothing was wrong. But my mom would come along and say, "What's wrong, Aalia?" And all it took was those words, and I would just start bawling. Well, Mom, and actually, but normally when those questions get asked to me in present day, I mean, I'm a grown woman now. I'm not crying to everybody. But when you guys asked it, I just couldn't help but be. It just came out, and so by the end, it was the connection. It was being open, and then on top of it, it was the words that you guys actually provided, the instruction that you gave in response to what was happening within the circle. And I don't want to give it all away, because I just want other people to go and experience that themselves. But I really found such incredible value from it, and I mean that.
Wait, your presence was, it's so profound when someone shows up, and it's just like, that's all you have to do to be a part of a Zen circle is show up as you are, who you are, with what you got. Just, and that's part of the being non-dogmatic, is the questions. There's simple questions that are about you, right? They're not leading you into a certain religion or a certain belief. They're all, whatever you believe is going to be your reflection. And that's such a intention of the circles.
Yeah, you guys do a great job. Wait, Sean, how is it working with Enrico?
Yeah, it's been an absolute journey. It's been an absolute blessing as well. I think what I love about our relationship is that we constantly remind ourselves to have fun, and just like going back into that playfulness, that childlike experience of what is it like to play and to be reckless and to take risks and to not let our days be consumed through judgments and what other people think, or I'm afraid, or there's fears or doubts. So reminding and bringing out the best of each other. And the best part is that, like, as founders and best friends and just like growing together, it's amazing how we have these tool sets that we use within the Zen circle, outside of the Zen circles, to start building. So using having an expansive tool set of learning how to nonviolently communicate, learning how to actively listen, learning how to use natural language processing, and all of these fun tools that allow us to get to the bottom of like what's going on, what is our needs and our wants at this moment right now. And I like that is huge, that if I can apply to every relationship in my life.
Yeah, because working relationships can sometimes be very difficult. You guys have such an amazing balance. And you both, like, I know within the Zen circle, it's very, and sometimes one of you will operate it right, and then sometimes, one or the other, but you guys keep them going. So coronavirus, when it first came on the scene, you guys were more focused on the physical, these pop-ups. What has what have you changed now, and how has that helped you grow the Zen circles?
Sean, you want to jump in?
Absolutely. So the obvious is going onto the digital virtual side of things. And I think within that, we've been testing the waters by doing digital virtual experiences, and we've always planned to do it pre-COVID. And of course, now this is the primary focus and the way to host these circles and other workshops and experiences we're doing. And it was really interesting because the debate was, will there be the same amount of flow? Will the experience be the same? The questions and the prompts, and like, will people feel like they got the value from doing this digitally, not being physically in person next to each other? Because I just think like that's my natural thought process of like, when we're together in person, there's this sense of warmth, connection. Right. And I think it's just been fascinating week after week after week, learning and discovering and experiencing that creating these digital circles have been its own unique asset, its own unique product, its own unique experience that is so amazing in its own way, because it's just like, I think the thing of letting go of like the unknown and knowing and to trust the process. And once it starts to work, it works.
Right.
And it's like 8 billion people are doing it as well. So it's like there's nothing to it but to just do it. And it's been a fantastic journey.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine the challenge would be going from in person, and I get that too, because of course the energy, again, going back to that energy concept. However, you guys have also seemed to now have the ability to extend that reach. Virtual and digital gives you an ability to have somebody plug in from New York or, Chicago. And that has to be a benefit as opposed to one of the challenges,
We had someone from Trinidad join a couple weeks back, and just growing internationally, and people have been in Canada, so all over the US, and it's fascinating, because actually one of my good friends was joining a digital circle, and he was telling me, I love the in-person circles, but I think like I could do a digital circle every single week, because that's more my speed. Because once I'm done, I can just unplug and I can sit there and I meditate for about 15 minutes alone. And that's my speed. And so I think like what Sean was saying, this is a whole different product in itself. And I think that the COVID actually forced us to realize that this was something that's going to be a whole lane upon itself. I think that we thought it was like, oh, there's this little thing and that's nice on the side, but now we're realizing this is a whole lane that we're going to be utilizing for many years to come.
And I think that's important. While a lot of us look to see how our business is going to, be transitioned, and yet we still want to remain mindful of our goal, which is to empower others. So you guys really started Zen House with the, like I said, it's created for entrepreneurs, leaders, and creatives, of which you guys are all three of those. And then, and you have that objective. What, like one circle at a time, right? So how do you feel it continues? Well, I mean, actually, I shouldn't say how. I know for a fact that one of the things I love about helping other people be better versions of themselves is them going into their community and doing the same. Sean, you talked about that. You had your own evolution, your growth, and then you said, how can I help someone else? I mean, that's how we really pay it forward, right? And so how do you guys continue to build this model, knowing that you want to bring value to the entrepreneurs, the leaders, and the creatives?
Yeah, so it's all about sustainability. When me and Sean were talking about doing this work and how much this has impacted us personally, I think that what we think about is, how do we share this with as many people as possible? So one circle at a time. So as we're thinking about sharing this to more people, that's when we really realize like the training is what is going to create sustainability within this organization, because now we can teach the leaders of the Zen circle. And so being able to create a sustainable training where we have consistent people learning how to run a Zen circle, why you might even want to run a Zen circle. And that's the whole interesting part of the journey, right? So Aalia, you came and you experienced it as someone who witnessed and was a participant of a Zen circle. And there's so much that we can get from that and that we do get from that. And what people realize when they step into leadership is that there's a whole other plateau of what this Zen circle offers, right? And so it's kind of like, you can go to a party and that's amazing. That's a great feeling. But what does it feel like to host a party? What does it feel like to be that person that invited, the whole neighborhood and everybody had a good time and, people were just talking about it. And so what we're creating with the leadership training is a whole new opportunity to tap into your Zen, to learn about clear communication, like Sean was talking about, to learn about active listening. Because when you're at a circle, you're participating, and the participation in itself is is a place of growth. But then stepping into the leadership training and understanding, how do I take someone from the beginning of the circle to the end of the circle, and also realizing how this is a metaphor for all leadership. All leadership is a container, bringing somebody from the introduction into the end. What does that journey look like? How do you make that something that is entertaining, or something that people are getting drawn into, rather than like you're forcing them to do it? And some of the best companies in the world, like Apple and Disney and Nike, right, they're drawing people into their companies and creating this narrative. And so the leadership training is really all about creating sustainability in the people who are coming to the Zen circles.
Yeah. Enrico, you're a father, and I know I didn't ask you too much, but I mean, how much of your personal background how much of your personal background really influences what you're doing? Because you have a very unique background as well. We relate on the whole multicultural, both you guys and I do. But I want to ask you that, and also I would like for you guys to really explain to our audience what the Zen mentality is, because I know we love the late Kobe Bryant. We all are about the Mamba mentality, but I love that you guys are really focused on Zen mentality. So, how has your background influenced what you're doing now, and what does Zen mentality mean to you guys?
Yeah, I have a deep multicultural background. I'm the grandson of a Holocaust survivor, so that's been something that's been very deep in my spirit. Also, ancestors of freed slaves. So those different backgrounds really caused me to want to have a Zen lifestyle. I think a lot of the Holocaust survival energy is like this chaotic, and like I want to find peace. And so I think a big part of me wanting that is just like growing up in that energy and wanting to have more calmness and Zen in my life. So constantly, as like 15, 16-year-old, I was into Anthony Robbins and personal growth and going really deep into that. And that led me to starting a business at a very early age and having some financial success at a very early age, and also becoming a father at a pretty early age, at the age of 21. And so all of these things definitely created this container of like a very empathetic person, somebody who's dedicated to growth. And I think also my current relationship with my partner really brought me into a place of wanting to understand how to communicate the best I could. My love for her and my commitment. It's like, how can we be together in the strongest way possible? So I think my background has been so critical. And I think honestly on my the African American side, I think the concept of fun and pushing through trauma and still bringing this fun energy is such a big part of why we do that at the Zen House, and that's such a big part of my spirit.
It's amazing. Sean, what's the Zen mentality?
Yeah, when I first think about it, it's about, what comes up for me is ownership, taking ownership of our actions, because we have thoughts, we may believe those thoughts, and then we act upon those beliefs. And when we can take ownership and not blame other people, I think that's when we start to develop responsibility. And then that for me is like the first opportunity to really dive into growth, where now what I say I'm going to do, I got to go do. And when I start to build a life of integrity, a life of accountability, that starts to work for me. And also to be focusing on, well, what is the big picture here? What is my purpose? What is my mission? How do my actions align with, like I mentioned, my beliefs and my thoughts? And how do I create that alignment of being in integrity and being in, like I like to say, being Zen? So really having that inner peace, that mindfulness in our minds, in our bodies, of like doing the things that we say we're going to do and taking responsibility and ownership for that. And another part of being Zen is like taking a look at I like to call the shadows, which in other terms are the self-limiting beliefs that we have. So for example, I'm not good enough. I'm not capable of greatness. I can't do it. Things like that prevent me from actually pushing into the judgments that others may have or I may have about myself, and pushing past that into like, who am I truly if I was being me, Sean? Who can I be and what can I do if I were being authentic, vulnerable, and truthful with myself and in integrity with myself? So being Zen is all about cutting through the judgments and the stories and the self-limiting beliefs and really coming at it from the foundation of who we are. It's like, who were we as a kid? Having fun, being present, being mindful, and coming back to that space as well.
You know, it's interesting when you say that. I love that. Thank you, because I feel that so many people would benefit from that. When I had a talk at the event I hosted and executive produced at the LA Convention Center and PowerCon last year. And my talk was specifically on shattering those beliefs, or shattering the limiting beliefs. And, we tend to be so much defined by the things that other people told us. Like you said, I believe that I'm not pretty enough because somebody told me you weren't that pretty. I believe that, that job's going to be really hard to get because someone else told me I wasn't maybe qualified. Like, the things that we allow other people to influence. I know one meme out there says that the worst thing I've ever done is believe someone else's opinion of me. And like you said, when we take that ownership, it's a huge transition within yourself, and then also the energy that you're putting out. So I feel like, that what you're doing by teaching people how to take ownership and shatter. And by the way, when I mean shatter, I mean take a freaking knife. A hammer to a glass and shatter it, because you're not obliged to believe what someone else believes about you. You're only obliged to believe about what you believe about yourself. And there's so many times people say, well, I can't. And it's like, no, you can. And my husband always likes to say, well, that's pretty hard. I'm like, yeah, but it's not impossible. Everything in life is pretty hard, by the way, if you really want to boil it down. It's pretty hard to have kids. It's pretty hard to be in a marriage, not because you don't love your spouse, but because things happen. You see the amount of divorces that are happening right now with coronavirus. People are having tougher times. People are being put face to face with a lot of things, and just understanding that that ownership is key. I love that you do that. So offer me, if you guys will, in our audience, 3 key principles to living that Zen mentality.
Yeah, I would say one of the first principles is the principle of compassion. Starting with yourself, being loving and being compassionate towards yourself and the people around you. I think that's the foundation. The first step to, having a Zen lifestyle is, let's say you're going to invest in yourself. That doesn't happen unless you're being compassionate and you're being self-loving and that you're worth that investment. And so I think all of the steps that we take are these small little incremental investments. And so I think the first step is a place of being compassionate. And I'll let Sean take the next one.
The second step, what comes up for me, is patience and having this beginner's mindset of like not knowing what's going to happen, but also trusting the process, trusting the uncertainty, knowing what we can and cannot control, especially during these times. And yeah, being like a beginner, starting like in a creative way, in an entrepreneurial way, in a way to become a leader. And I think just like as Enrico said, step by step, brick by brick, just like focusing on the foundation, where we come from, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going.
And I'll say the third one is really understanding what it is that you want and being in this space of transformation and creativity. Some may call it also the sacred sexual energy, but transforming what it is that you have into what it is that you want. And that process that's also included in meditation. It's a process of coming to things like Zen circles, journaling, really understanding what do I want inside, because I feel like a Zen lifestyle is really about us achieving what it is that we desire. And, going back to the beginning, it's like having that compassion so that we're willing to invest in ourselves and we're willing to take the steps required in order for us to get what it is that we deeply desire in our hearts, where that's where we'll be in this place of Zen while even in the pursuit of that creates a place of Zen.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I love those. And then when I heard you speak, Sean, it reminded me to your second point, even the best athletes have to be open to coaching, right? Like, being someone, you can be very good and you can have all this raw talent and you could be, but, even leaders have to be open. Leaders go to see Tony Robbins and they pay quite a bit of money to be taught by him. One of the things I love about what we do is I think it's more on that granular level. I know for me, I'm really passionate about taking that type of material and training and inspiration to the community who need it most, because when you know how to operate in your life better, you will operate better, not just in one area, right? So you'll work better in your professional life. You'll operate better in your personal relationships. You'll operate with just a better understanding of how this goes. And being open to that coaching is, again, I think really cool. And what you guys are doing is inviting people to experience that. What's your vision for Zen House? What's on the horizon?
Sean, you want to jump into that?
Yeah, I think going digitally and also creating a focus of creating presence on the ground. And we plan to open up our flagship in 2021, which has always been the mindset from day one, and creating a community where we are able to tap into being Zen, into that Zen state of mind. And by creating ways of how can our members and our community and the people of interest create accountability and give back to the community, give back to not just themselves, but look at the bigger picture of why are we all in this together, and knowing that collectively we can continuously grow. So I see this as a global transformation in many ways. And I think it takes one city, one brick, one place at a time, and continuously using the digital front to expand into unknown territories, into different countries and places where we can actually have an international presence to continue to doing this work. And I think it's just really the commitment, as Enrico said in the beginning, is showing up. And I think that's what makes it so much fun, because there's not much to it but to do it.
Right. And, I have to bring up, it was a very sad story today to learn that the WWE Shad Gaspar was right there. Actually, Enrico, you're in Venice. And he was there swimming with his son, and a riptide or something to that effect pulled them, and they were only able, he said, "Here, take my son." And then, of course, his body was found this morning. And that's tragic. And I bring that up because, when I shared it with my husband last night, there's this perception, and I don't mean to use him necessarily as an example in any bad way. I don't. My family, my condolences to him and his family. But, it does once again always show us, like, sometimes it's not about how big you are or how, we think we're so strong, right? And we are in this all together, whether we like it or not, and life can really pull stuff out from under you. And to many people, coronavirus is just that. It's come on and it's swept people into a situation where they feel like they're drowning, or they feel like they can't get out. And And it's tragic to see that something like that has happened, but it's also, once again, representative that anybody is vulnerable to anything. And we never know, we're not guaranteed anything. No amount of strength, no amount of intelligence can keep us from, to some extent, what our destinies are. And, I know that right now when I look around at what I see in the world, I want people to operate, like you said, with so much more compassion, because it doesn't really matter what you believe. It is a matter of what we know. And we know that as human beings, we're all susceptible to what's happening right now. And, I guess I question to you guys, what are the things that you feel are really critical to society right now? What do you say to the audience? What do you want them to do?
Yeah, I think that there's this whole place of the ego, right? And going to what Sean was saying about the beginner's mindset, it's like we have this linear way of thinking here in the West, especially here in America. It's like, how do we learn the English language, ABCs, right? From there, we can spell, we can read. So there's this natural linear progression to the way that we learn. And I think that that's so tied in with the ego. It's like, we want to be right. We want to know, am I doing this right? Did I get the A? Did I check it off right? And that's this linear way of thinking. And I think that there's a lot of benefits to that way of thinking. And there's also this non-linear way of thinking. And I think that it's so much about how do we start to let go of the ego, that the brother that died, it's like I've been literally in that same situation as him in Venice Beach, where I'm thinking to myself, like, this could be it. The riptide is pulling me back. I made it to shore. I could barely breathe. I could barely move my arms. And that was a moment of like me checking in with God, like, you have to understand how serious this life is.
Right.
And your ego of what you thought you were doing. Cause I just really wanted to go swim in the ocean. And I remember the lifeguard was like, be careful. And I was like, yeah. And just to show, I think it's almost, it's so real that happened to me, and that there's a result of that, and rest in peace to that brother.
Yeah.
I just know that the ego it can tell us things that aren't true.
A
We
false
were
sense of
talking,
confidence. It can give you a false sense of confidence.
right, and we were talking about how people tell us stories like, you're not pretty. And then there's also stories we tell ourselves. There's self-limiting stories that we tell ourselves. And sometimes those stories are, I'm so smart, I always have to be right. And so what I want people to do is to tap into a more non-egoic way of being. And I think so much of that is about compassion, because it's about listening to what other people have to say, and to realize that I have a perspective, but just because I might have a different perspective than you, that doesn't mean that I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
And so there's this non-dualistic way of thinking, this non-egoic way of thinking, that's what I want to share with people, to sit more in the beginner mind state. And to like sum it up, I think there's these three circles, right? You have the circle in the middle and two circles surrounding that. Circle in the middle is all the information that we know. The circle surrounding that is all the information we know we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a circle surrounding that goes on into infinity. And that's all the stuff we don't know, we don't know. And so my want is for all of us to realize how big that outside circle is. And so we can just have a little bit more compassion, a little bit more fun, stop taking everything so serious, and realize there's so much we don't know. Most of us, if not all of us, are trying our best. And so how can we just keep stepping forward on this journey without, hurting each other in unnecessarily fashion?
Absolutely. And having different perspective doesn't make us enemies either, because you see a lot of that. Sean, really quick,
It
30
shouldn't.
seconds.
Yeah. So I think to add to that, it's like this idea of the false confidence, this idea of ego, is like we create this separation with ourselves and with each other and with the world and with our cultures.
Yeah.
And the goal here is to create integration where we can be together. And through having that false confidence and creating those stories and judgments, now there is really more of the not just the separation, but the ignorance. We are ignorant of each other, of each other's cultures, and how can we win that way? How can we create a win-win situation? So like bringing ignorance into an understanding. And once we understand where we come from, then we can be more tolerant and accepting of each other's cultures, of where we come from, where we're going. And I think that's why the prime focus, like the center front stage of Zen House, is diversity. And when we can empower diversity as the fuel behind what it is we're doing, then we can create ultimately a global transformation.
That's amazing. I love that. Where can our audience find you guys at? We have you for the audio, for the visual, but audio. Enrico?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Enrico Moses. That's ENRICOMOSES.
And Sean?
My website, SEAN-ZEN, seanzen.com. And of course, we can attend a circle at zenhouse.la.
Awesome. Well, you guys, I thank you so much for being with us today. It's really been
Thanks
a
for having
pleasure,
us,
and I
Aalia.
love because also speaking on multicultural, we live with that within ourselves, and it's great to show other people that they can coexist and they don't cancel one or another out. So thank you guys for all of your input, audience. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate your time, and thanks for letting us be Unsugarcoated. See you next week. Bye bye.
Peace and love, y'all.
Thank you.